Today I want to talk about redesigning shapes and to think a little bit about where I can push or alter color a little bit to suggest a stronger sense of color. Of course, values go without saying, but a lot of times we'll have photographs like this one. There's a lot of stuff I like about it. I like the dappled lighting, the shadows and light on the mountains, and I like the value and contrast of the clouds against the sky. This light and dark here in the grass, the water down here, but the clouds are all lined up in a row. No staggering or anything, no depth in there. The mountain is way too straight. Even these, even though they kind of go up and down, they're all the same height. Same thing with the trees. Again, there's a lot of variation in height with the trees, but maybe get rid of some things, open up some areas, maybe get rid of some of these trees, maybe a spot in here, just so it opens up some space where you can look past the trees more to the background. Foreground has some nice value change from the dark grass to the lighter dirt, but I'd like to have a way of creating, something that leads you into the background. And I can do that with the light dirt against the darker green. Or I could have the water kind of create a trail that leads to this pond. Certain times of the year, that's what happens. Water fills up more and there's trickles down from up here. So thinking about ways to change things, also maybe pushing the color. Again, the values look good here, but the color's a bit too just gray. I want some gray in here, but overall I want a bit stronger color to give the color a bit more of a punch. So that's what we want to think about changing. Picking a photograph that has a lot going for it, or a scene if you're outside. There's a lot going on there and it's paintable, but there's some things that need to be changed. So thinking through that. And the first thing I do here, well, not the first thing, the whole thing I do here is let's start with the clouds, breaking up, cutting out some of the clouds in there, creating some space between them, and then having some clouds come in front so they're more staggered, less lined up all in a row. So what I've done here is, again, create some space here. I might have this cloud overlap a bit more so it comes in front, but just changing the shape of the clouds so it's more broken up, more staggered, not all lined up in a row. Same thing with the mountains here. You can look at them. I'm getting rid of that straight line that's right there and creating more variation. Also simplifying the lights and darks a bit more. There's light here and here, kind of faded. So I'm go ahead and creating stronger contrast and definite changes of dark and light, bigger holes, more definite holes of light in the shadow. Also, in the mountain, I like this shape here, but it's a bit too, kind of like an A. It's too equal on both sides of that hill. It's also too far over to the left, so I'm going to move it in. I move it over a little bit and create a different shape. You can see a more interesting shape there. Then we move to the trees, two lined up here, and break it up a bit more here, get rid of some of those trees. I want this tree to move down a little bit so that they're not all in a row. They're staggered. This one comes forward. And again, changing some of the trees here. These I'll push into the background, make them a little lighter and bluer, because the trees do get all too much the same value. Even the ones in the distance. Of course, I got rid of these. And these are pushed back a little bit. I could lighten them and cool them down a little bit. And then in the foreground here, I like the foreground. I can use that contrast of light dirt against a darker green, but I'm going to also meander a little bit of a stream leading to this. This is all kind of a wash, a river. It's just dry a lot of time of the year. This is in California. Very arid. These rivers kind of dry up. So you can do a lot with them. More water in them, a little less. Also, the shadows here, I've made them a little bigger. They're there in the photograph, but they help break up that foreground a bit more. So you can see the changes there. While they're subtle in some ways, they're not big obvious changes, but they make a big difference. And they go a long way to make your painting work better. Also pushing the color of these shrubbery in here. A little bit more of a green as opposed to a yellow green of the grass. Kind of that sage color. Also pushed a stronger violet here and here, which if you compare it to the photograph, both those hills in the background, the shadows, I've added violet. Not making them a real strong violet, but affecting that gray color with a little bit of violet, just to keep it from just going gray. I do want some gray in it, but I want it to look violet at the same time. So as we look at some of these other photographs, same thing. We want to look for things that can help the painting. Like this building here, it can be more of a focal point, making it a little bit bigger, making trees, maybe hill a little bit bigger, just to vary the shape of the trees so you can stagger them. These are a bit too much the same height. And I like the shadow pattern here, which is what drew me here in the first place, the shadow pattern on the mountain. And also the shadow pattern in the foreground. I might go ahead and make that more of a definite pattern. And I'll just use gray here to make it, maybe have this shrubbery stick out. Of course, it wouldn't be gray, it would be a dark blue-green. But filling in more of that foreground so it simplifies the foreground. Doesn't make it quite so busy. And the viewer's eye can jump over the foreground to more of the center of interest there. Whereas here, there's too much little dark and light in the foreground. It's distracting. But if I put a bigger shadow over the whole thing, a little bit of dappled light, but not much, then the contrast of the background will stand out more. The other thing is the value in the mountains. You have the definite shadow pattern, which is obvious to see, and the definite light, but you need to distinguish between the light and the halftone. In other words, I can't just have dark and light. In the light area, there's too much form changing. There has to be halftone, maybe some more dark in there. But if we do a value change here, get rid of the color, just desaturate it, you'll see, well, you don't see it that much, but you see a little bit of the light. The light hits the edge that's facing to the right, and then the plane or the side of the hill that's facing the viewer is more of a halftone. So there has to be a definite light and halftone. So that when I paint that, so if I have the light here, I'm going to have more halftone, maybe a bit lighter. Halftone, halftone. I can simplify it. I don't have to have a bunch of little halftones and lights. But I do want more halftone than I want more contrast there between the halftone and light. Won't be as much contrast as between the light and the shadow, or the halftone and the shadow. And I can soften these edges a little bit as well. But there has to be more value change in the light and halftone. Otherwise, it's just going to go flat in the painting. Works in the photograph. We don't notice it because, we consider photograph just reality. But in the painting, we have to have more of that value change. And looking at another one here, same thing here. If I make this a black and white, you can see the value change. This becomes darker now, a little bit darker here and lighter on top. And that's what I want to show. Same thing in this area. There's a lighter light and then kind of a darker halftone. So I want to use two values in the light, not just one. In the photograph, we can start with one, simple dark and a simple light, but then we have to add the halftone. Or we start with the dark and the halftone and then add the light. But you can see it a lot better here. This is definite halftone and this is definite light. And you have to have that value change. You see it here as well. Light, halftone, halftone. So it has to have that feeling of more form. And you get that with changing the value. So you have a light here, dark, light, dark, light. And then as you go up, the form changes again. You get halftone light, some halftone light. And even if you can't tell what's going on, you have to have those two values. in the light. Same thing with the dark, an overall dark and then a slightly darker dark. Because I see two values in here. An overall shadow value and then a slightly darker shadow value in there. Not much, but it helps to turn these photographs to black and white once in a while. You can really see the value change from here to the background. You can really see a big change from here to the background. So focus more on value. It doesn't matter what color you use in there. It matters more about those value changes to make the forms look more three-dimensional.